Welcome to a new episode of the Melter podcast from the Munich English Language Teachers Association. I'm Michael Saunders, and today we're joined by Mark Powell. Hi, Mark.
Hi, Michael.
Mark is a familiar name in the ELT world as well as, especially in business English, as a business English trainer, the author of a zillion materials, I think, as well, like this exact one I have here, a bit of an older version of In Company.
That's the second edition. There's a third one. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a multi-level series. I wrote two of them anyway. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But
and a couple of books for Cambridge on presentations and negotiations, which are a bit newer. Yeah.
We'll put links in the description of the video as well for these. But yeah, I was teaching a course from this recently as well. So it's because we're online, you can't sign this for me, Mark. But anyway.
Send you a digital signature. Yeah, and you can.
This is the way it's working, or an NFT or whatever it is the cool kids are talking about.
That's right. Yeah.
Today. And I think, of course, you run was it Cert IBET? You've run a lot of this Cert IBET.
I ran a lot of those. Yes, the Cert IBET for Trinity College London. It was then. I think it's changed now, but I ran a lot of those. Yes, teacher training courses for people moving into business English. Yeah.
So Cert IBET, people know CELTA, Delta, and things like that. Cert IBET, I guess, is similar, but with a specific focus.
Bit of an add-on, yes. It's a sort of early and mid-career extension course, if you like. Some people do it straight after the CELTA, but it's usually better to have a bit of experience first, I think, before you launch into it. And it just really helps you with the adjustments that you have to make when you go from teaching general English to teaching professionals or business people. Although, of course, nearly everybody is a business person in some form or another. So even your general English group are going to have jobs or already have them. So the demarcation lines aren't so clear.
How long does it take to do this Cert IBET?
Of course, it's a 50-hour course minimum. I think you can probably do more if you want, but it's a minimum 50 hours course. Used to be only face-to-face, but I think now you can do hybrid or blended versions. In fact, I think you can even do it fully online. There's even a distance version, a number of versions actually. But as I say, it's for early and mid-career. So I think there's more of a gap actually at the moment for later career, more experienced business English teachers, people who are more at the sort of Delta diploma type level, or even masters, ELT level. There's nothing for them at the moment, and I think there should be. So if there are any universities out there or examining bodies that fancy setting up something a bit higher level for business English professionals, then I'd be happy to talk to them.
Yeah, it's good that you can do it online. I remember the pandemic changed a lot of that. Yeah, CELTA, it became possible to do CELTA, I think, entirely online.
Yeah.
I did the Delta Module 1 last year, although I had to sit an exam in a real place, of course, in the IRL, in real life. Sure. Yeah, the more and more this is becoming possible online as well. And I also saw that you are now exploring more and more this so-called fertile middle ground between language and soft skills development, which I think is interesting because I mostly teach general English courses, but a few business courses as well. And I seem to spend a lot of my time teaching soft skills as well. Like I teach here in Germany, and for Germans, their small talk is a topic they always want
small
to practice.
Talk. Yeah.
Small talk,
when I had German students, they always said they couldn't do small talk. I don't know where they got this idea from, but they seem to have the idea that they can't, we can't do small talk here in Germany, Mark. It's too small. It's good for you British, but for Germans, no. And I'm like, but you can, because I was in a hotel in Munich, I think it was actually, staying in a hotel doing something, probably for Melter years ago. And as I was going down the corridor for breakfast, just about everybody who passed me in the corridor, in the lift, was going like, Morgan, 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 in a way that nobody would do that in Britain. I mean, no stranger would just say morning to you in that breezy manner in the corridor. So they can do small talk. It's just too small. So it's sort of, what do you say after you've said Morgan? because morning itself is a bit Faulty Towers, isn't it? If you remember, there's sort of morning Faulty, morning Colonel, morning.
Yeah.
Remember that, whatever it was.
Papers arrived, Faulty. Papers arrived.
Papers arrived, Faulty. Yeah, exactly. There's that. But so that small talk for them, it seems to be an area that they want to look at. But that's just one soft skill, obviously. And it's a macro skill because it covers a lot of different bases, small talk. And, you might want sort of ways of entering a conversation, ways of leaving a conversation, ways of showing interest in a conversation, ways of telling little anecdotes or stories in a conversation. So it breaks down into lots of different things. But yeah, as a macro skill, for certain cultures, particularly the ones that are less happy about self-disclosure and take a little while to get to know you, those cultures often need a bit more on that sort of thing.
Yeah, and they're often quite surprised about which topics are acceptable or encouraged to small talk as well, I find.
Yeah,
and
getting away from the boring, weather and news and stuff like that. It isn't an easy art to master, but there are some strategies that will help. And one of them actually is just the ability, as we're going to talk about a bit later on, to tell short stories. And by stories, I just mean little snippets of experiences that you've had with a bit of a purpose, a bit of a point to telling that story. In fact, a lot of socializing is story. I think the University of Liverpool did some research recently, and they kind of found that about 65% of everyday conversation in the workplace and in people's free time, leisure time, is storytelling of one form or another. It's either gossip, or it's catching up on, did you do that thing you said you were, how did that go, and so on. So a lot of it is in fact storytelling.
That's an interesting statistic. I'm going to keep that in mind as I go about my daily life.
Yeah, it's about 2/3 of chit chat is kind of telling little stories. And it kind of passes around a group. So one person will tell something about themselves and then somebody else will be reminded of something that's similar or whatever. And that's how social English really works. It's definitely not question, answer, to try to find something in common, desperately trying to find some common ground, as we're kind of told that's what socializing is about.
Yeah, all those typical kind of classroom activities.
Yeah, find something in common with the... Actually, there's been a bit of research on that as well. An interesting book. What's the name? It's called is it called The Small Big, I think. It's by a guy called Robert Cialdini, is one of the authors. He's a sort of expert on influence. And he found that it's not finding things in common with people that builds rapport, because we've all got lots of things in common. I mean, I could say to you, have you ever taught an elementary class? And you'd say, well, yeah, so have I, big deal. I mean, hardly surprising, is it? It's finding uncommon commonalities with other people. In other words, something that we have in common with each other, but not many other people do that thing or are that thing. Are you with me? So we suddenly discover we're both from exactly the same village in, I don't know, South Wales or something. I mean, that's a fairly coincidental thing. Or we both went on this particular course in whitewater rafting with this particular instructor. That is what you're really looking for, actually. You're always on the lookout for the uncommon commonality that draws you together. But anyway, we're getting a bit sidetracked, I guess, onto small talk.
Yeah, but the gap, or bridging the gap, or between language teaching, so teaching these McNuggets of language, as they say, versus the soft skills as well. And this is, I guess, something that's changing in ELT. And
well, yeah, generally ELT has been a bit hung up on phrases and expressions and functional exponents, and getting people to use them in awkward ways and crank them into conversations. Oh, how interesting, do tell me more, and all of these kind of things. And they just don't come across as natural. I mean, repetition is a great way to interact when somebody else is telling you a story or You just echo what they say, or you echo it with enthusiasm, or you echo it with a query as if you want them to tell a bit more. Paris. Oh, interesting. So what was that like? You know, that kind of thing. Or Paris. Oh, yeah. Oh, Leon. Right. Yeah. I thought you meant Leon. Right. Okay. So you can just, just very, very minimal things to just coax the speaker along. And people usually think they've had a great conversation with you at the end of it if they've done all the talking.
Yeah.
They're great because most people, I mean, who was it? Eric Byrne, I think, the originator of transactional analysis, of an old-fashioned thing now, but he said everyone in the world just wants to be listened to, but they seldom get what they want because so does everyone else.
Yeah.
And so if you can be a good listener, I mean, what I was talking about with Melter recently was storytelling, but the flip side of that is listening and listening to stories and encouraging other people to tell their story. And that's a skill too, and definitely a soft skill, which I would say is well worth developing. And most people don't know how to do it. We never have lessons on listening. We rarely have lessons on speaking in school or a basic oracy, but who the hell has a listening lesson? Today we're learning how to listen.
I've been watching videos recently about how to give a speech, and that's getting a bit further away from ELT, I guess. But still, at the same time, it's there's so much to it, and when you see somebody confidently and effectively giving a talk, a speech, it's amazing. It's not actually that difficult, but people don't know. I was at a conference recently where we had 50 talks, and almost every one of them was like, "Hello, my name is. This is the talk." No storytelling, no anecdotes, anything. Just pointing at a presentation.
Just the sort of that cold start, like the engine, come on, more choke. Oh, flooded it now. That kind of start. Hello, my name is. Thanks for coming. Nice to see so many people. Oh, come on, get to the point. We know who you are. We know what you're talking about. We read the program. Do something. Tell a joke, tell a story, show us a picture, give us a statistic, something. Just get in there, dive into the talk straight away, start in media res, don't build up to it. We don't, I mean, the thing about presentations is you don't want foreplay. Forget it. Get straight down to business, basically. That's my philosophy anyway. I mean, okay, it might not work in every kind of presentation, I guess. But even in business, I think it does. It does. The people appreciate it if you just get to the point.
Yeah, I think people think there is this expectation to do all the foreplay, like you say, as well. And when I've
thanking the organizers.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks, Jackie, for organizing. Oh God, who's he gonna thank next? The person who made the sandwiches? I mean, who cares?
He's
just wasting time. He's only talking for 20 minutes. He's already had 5. He hasn't said anything yet. I mean, no, just get to the point. The beginning of a presentation is the moment to be calming yourself, relaxing, getting into it, and getting the audience hooked, if possible. Not necessarily in a melodramatic way, could be quite a gentle sort of way. But have a beginning and know down to the last detail what you're going to do and say, even if you don't end up doing and saying it quite like that, for the first minute. Because after the first minute, you're kind of away.
Yeah, then you're rolling.
Then it's not going to work anyway. But if it's going to work, you'll know after a minute. So get that first minute right. That's always been my philosophy anyway.
So what else do you think, before we talk about storytelling business, what else do you think has changed or is new in business English teaching, has changed over the years?
It's changed a lot. I mean, of course, I can go back rather a long way, probably a lot further than anybody watching or listening to this broadcast. But maybe they could ask their grandparents what it was like. When I started, business English materials for a start hardly existed. And the ones that there were rotten. They were black and white. They were dull as ditch water. And nobody knew how to write the material. It was literally just general English switched to the office. So it would be like, where is the paperclip? It's on the desk over there. I literally mean, I could give you the title and the author of that book, but I won't. And then in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s, we got some slightly sexier, full color, more like general English course books, but for business. Lots of functional exponents with units like language of meetings, language of telephoning, letter writing then, that kind of thing. This is pre-email. Never mind pre-WhatsApp and all the rest of it. And that was fine. And that was sort of general business English. So it was the sort of English all business people kind of need. Bit hit and miss. Actually, nobody specifically needed any of that, but they sort of did. So it kind of washed just about. That kind of business English now, I think, is less and less common. There are fewer and fewer business people, at least, wanting that kind of one-size-fits-all course. I think it still works for pre-service, you know, students of business studies. These sort of courses like Market Leader and things like that, where they're learning a bit about business, some business vocabulary, and some basic business communication skills. I think it still works for them because they haven't really got any experience of business at all, and they don't know what area they'll be going into. But for people who are already in business, they kind of know what they want. And although needs analysis, which we all talk about in business English, of course, is useful and essential, in fact, it's not always enough. And I think at the moment, business English has polarized into sort of the two ends to it, really. There's ESP, very specific purposes. English for auditors. Yeah, you know, hell, what do you do with that? I mean, if I knew about auditing, presumably I'd be an auditor, because who the hell would learn about that unless they were in it? So the thing is, how do you go about teaching them? Well, you can shadow them in the workplace and you can interview them. And increasingly, you can use AI to access things for you that you wouldn't otherwise have access to help you learn this specialist area. So, I mean, if you have got a niche, you can do very well in that. And I would definitely encourage business English teachers with a background in something, working for a bank, working in marketing, whatever it is, go for that niche. You've got a law degree, okay, business law, English for business law, go there. Even if you never practiced, but you've got an LLB in law, you know, do that. So that's one end, and it's very ESP. And then you go through what used to be general business English that's almost disappeared. And then you go to the other end, and it's so broad, it's what we've been calling just now soft skills. And this is a huge area. You know, it's creativity, it's critical thinking, it's influence and persuasion, it's mediation and negotiation, it's presentation, which is vocal intelligence partly, and use of visual aids and visual literacy and data literacy and storytelling and data storytelling, and it goes on and on and on. And these are skills which are, I mean, they are soft skills, they're life skills, really. And they're certainly employability skills, because they're the skills that recruiters look for in the staff that they want to recruit. And they often don't have those skills. They've got the keyboard skills, usually, people coming out of college, but they can't communicate, they can't work in a team, they don't seem to have much initiative or leadership. They're not really very familiar with empathy and trust building. They've kind of worked alone in a dark room with a bag of Doritos and an energy drink and their computer all the way through their university degree. And they've got the hard skills of using tech, but they haven't got much else. So I think this is the other big growth area for business English teachers to think about, is the soft skills end, the broad end, if you like, of the wedge. And then the other one being the pointed end, the ESP end, which could depend on if you have any particular expertise, or if you are very, very good at finding out about domains of language about which you previously knew nothing. Because I sometimes say that, you know, to be an ESP teacher, you need to be like an investigative journalist. You know, these are people who don't know about all the special things they investigate, but they find out, they do their research, and they become a kind of expert whilst doing this so that they can produce their documentary on a leak at a nuclear power plant about which they knew nothing previously, but now they do. So you have to be the sort of person who's really interested in following up on very specialist, very perhaps esoteric areas, particular communities of practice, as it's called, I think, in applied linguistics. Like, for example, software developers. You know, they have a special lexicon, they have jargon that they use, but they're also in particular situations using language in a particular way that you couldn't possibly know unless you were at that yourself. So can you investigate it and then produce materials for those people? So that's one end, and the other end is soft skills. And me, I'm more on the soft skills end of things.
I saw an article recently, I think it was about job positions here in Germany are increasingly stressing and listing soft skills as points, as requirements. So the typical job listing, or like, I'm also involved in technology field, programmer. Do you know these programming languages? Can you do X, Y, Z? But then increasingly actually explicitly asking for teamwork ability, the other things you mentioned. But I guess it's a bit hard to how do you quantify that? How do you gauge it? So you can say, yeah, I've got this many years experience in this programming language, or I speak B2 English, I've done this test, but I'm not sure how you go into an job interview and then you say, well, yeah, I'm actually really effective at, I guess then you have to prove it in the interview.
Well, yeah. Well, one thing I would say with that is that, yes, you're right. It's very difficult to quantify proficiency in soft skills. But one way you can do it straight away is if they ask you a behavioral question, but with what you've just said is a behavioral question, tell me how you work in teams and how good you are at working in a team, because all our work here is project-based and team-based. So how do I know that you'd be any good at working in a team? Well, instead of trying to explain all the qualities that you have that make you a good team player, tell a story of a team that you were in, and let that be the way that you demonstrate, one, that you are a team player, but two, that you can actually tell a story, which is a bit of a skill that's useful in a team. So it's a sort of loop thing, if you like. So instead of saying, well, I think I'm a good team player because I'm a very good listener and I'm very generous with my ideas. I don't hoard them. I'm happy to share them. You just sound like a bit of a hillock when you talk. You're almost showing off. Very immodest sort of way of talking. And you say, well, you asked me to say, why I'm a good team player. Yeah, well, don't say why you are. Demonstrate it through a story. Okay, let me tell you about, not actually a work situation, but while I was at college, I was actually on the university karate team. Because I used to practice karate. And when I was there, I thought, well, I'll go along. I'm not that good. But turned out hardly anybody actually was any good. All the best karateka weren't part of the university. They were part of the club, but they weren't actually at the college. So I ended up in the team, even though I'm not really very good. My very first fight was against a second dan black belt, and was me, a little lowly purple belt. And then you go on with there and tell the story of how the rest of the team, you work together cohesively so that you could each take on the person you thought you'd be best matched to. Tell that story. At least they'll remember the story, if nothing else, and you will stand out. And this is why soft skills are so important. If you take a very digital, logical approach to answering that interview question, you're not going to stand out amongst all the others who've been asked the same question. So
you gave a workshop recently for us.
Excuse me for rubbing my nose all the time, by the way. I've got a bit of a cold coming, so it's not. Those of you who are only listening, you're spared that. Those of you who have decided you really must see me are going to have to watch me do the nose flick.
You gave this talk about you gave this talk about storytelling in business for us, for Melter recently. So I guess we've talked a bit about it already. But you also mentioned before something about people. A lot of people are a bit reticent to talk about themselves. I feel like if they tell a story about themselves, they're putting themselves in in the spotlight. And we all know this is teaching. Some people just simply don't want to talk about themselves much for various reasons, and so that's a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, actually, when we did the webinar, I think it was Evan. Was it Evan? Evan Friendo, who you'll be familiar with at Melter, who I've known for years. He actually, he said, "Oh, yeah, but Mark, some people wouldn't culturally feel comfortable telling these stories about themselves." And it's true that, I mean, you know, culture may affect it. I think it's more a question of personality, actually. I think just some people don't like self-disclosure. And if you think about it, ELT is full of self-disclosure activities. You know, tell us about your job, tell us about where you live, tell us about your family, tell us about your last holiday. I mean, even at low levels, it's all very self-disclosure. And then as you go higher up, it's, you know, tell us about your biggest failure. Tell us about your greatest success. Tell us about when something went wrong, or, you know, and you think, oh God, why do I don't feel comfortable? Well, it's true. Self-disclosure. There's a very good book, actually, by a guy, old book. I mean, it's probably not worth buying it, by a guy called John Powell, no relation, who wrote a book called Why Am I Afraid to Tell You Who I Am? And his basic idea was, why am I afraid to tell you who I am? I'm afraid to tell you who I am, because if I tell you who I am, you may not like who I am, and I'm all I've got. So those are the stakes. I mean, people think, oh, well, they don't want to tell them the story about when you remember in Monaco with the zoo. Do you remember that story? Oh, they don't want to hear that. Yeah, go on. It's good. No, I don't know. Go on. He was at this zoo in Monaco. All right. Oh, sure. All right. I'll tell you. You know that situation where you've been strong-armed into telling a story. I mean, the thing is this: if you've got some learners who don't want to tell anecdotes, don't want to tell stories about themselves, well, they don't have to always, provided there are some people in the group who are prepared to tell stories. They can borrow other people's stories. Let me tell you about my friend. Tell a story about somebody you know. That's the next best thing. The most powerful stories are the ones that are about you, because people then know that they're only getting this story because you're with them. It's not a story about Steve Jobs. It's not a story about some Persian legend. It's not a story about anyone else but you. And so they are the most powerful story. And the point is, if you're not comfortable talking about yourself, then you probably can't tell anecdotes, basically. I mean, how do you tell an anecdote without talking about yourself?
Yeah, unless, like you say, you're sharing somebody else's.
Yeah, someone else's story. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It would be a bit like coming on a negotiations English course and then saying, I want to do negotiations in English, but I'm not comfortable with confrontation or asking people for things I know they don't want to give me.
Yeah.
Right. Tricky then. I want to do an English for presentations course, but I'm terrified in front of large groups or even small groups, or actually anyone. Oh God. So in a sense, if you're not comfortable telling stories about yourself, then don't tell them. It reminds me of the old Tommy Cooper joke. I don't know if you remember Tommy Cooper.
Oh, of course, yeah.
You remember him? He had a joke. It was a great joke. He used to say, man goes to the doctor and says, it hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, well, don't do it.
Don't do it then, yeah.
If you think about it, it's like, well, it hurts when I tell stories about myself. Well, don't tell them.
Yeah.
Tell them about somebody else, because there are different types of story. And the third person story can also be good. Tell a story about a well-known business person and a mistake that they made, or a lucky break that they had, or the only danger with telling stories about other people is that your audience may already have heard this story. And that's not so good, especially if you're planning to take a whole minute over it and they go, oh God, here we go. I've heard this so many times. So you want to be careful, keep it short, and actually acknowledge the fact that they may have heard it by saying things like, the chairman of IBM Computers, Thomas Watson, the original CEO of, famously famously, and then tell the story, because you've said it's famously. In other words, we all know about it, and you'll be surprised, quite a lot of people actually won't have heard the story. But at least you've acknowledged, for those who have, that, oh, it's okay, he knows we've perhaps heard this before. Good. Okay. So, you know, that's one way of doing it. But yeah, I mean, whether or not you're telling a first person story, a third person story, sometimes people tell a second person story, especially salespeople.
Mm.
You know what it's like when you've gone out for a few drinks and you're in the bar and you can't remember how many drinks you've had, and you've got to drive home, and you wish you could just check your breath to make sure you're okay, because I don't know if you've ever been in that situation. Now, you can buy these breathalyzers that you can carry around, great big heavy things. But what if you could just use your mobile phone with a simple app, and you attach this little device here into the USB, blow into it, and it will tell you immediately how safe you are to drive. Wouldn't that be great? Well, we've invented one.
And you can buy these things now, I think, to
Yeah,
plug into your
exactly,
phone.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So a second person story is often a sales story. But
Mm.
really, all stories, whether they're first person, second person, third person, they're all really about first person plural. In other words, us. The story must resonate with your audience. Otherwise, there wasn't any point telling it. That is probably how stories for business are different from just once upon a time stories. You really have to have a reason for telling that story, and do not be shy to give them the punchline and tell them, you know, what you've learned, how you changed as a result of that experience. Or if it's a third person story, you know, why you've told them that, what's the message, what's the moral, what have we learned. That's really essential. And in fact, you could, if you wanted, start with the message. It's probably a good idea to start with why, as Simon Sinek tells us. Start with why. Why am I telling a story? What point do I want to make? If I haven't got a story from my own life, then go online using maybe AI. There are some AI apps now which will find stories for you specifically, Story Finder. I'll try and find a reference for one of those that you can put in a link somewhere. And you just say, I want a story, and it's got to be about a well-known company who tried to do something and then they couldn't do it, so they did something else, and it turned out to be really successful almost by mistake. What the hell? I don't know of any story like that. Can you give me one? And it actually will. It won't be very well told. You'll need to remodel it yourself, but you'll get the basic story. So this is an area where AI is actually good. It's better than just Googling it. If you Google it, you'll get so many things coming back that you could spend the rest of your life looking. But this will just give you a story. And if you don't like it, you just say, give me another one. And it'll go, okay. And it gives you another one. So I found out recently, for example, about Twitter. Twitter was only invented kind of by mistake. The company making it were actually making some podcast software. And then they saw that Steve Jobs and Apple were doing a similar thing, and theirs was not going to be able to compete with Apple. So they thought, oh shit, we put all this effort into, now what are we going to do? So then they came up with this idea, well, what about limiting the number of characters, and it's text, not speech? And I don't know, it's just a thought. All right. And so they created Twitter, which then became huge before Mr. Musk took it over and called it X. And now it's a little bit smaller than it was, but it's still pretty big, yeah? So there's a success story out of disaster, sort of, you know, ashes to success. And that was found through AI. So now you've got your little story that you can tell. And most people don't actually know that story. So it's a good one to do. Stories are good, even in business, because some people say, well, what do I need stories for in business? You know, what's wrong with data? Business people want data. They don't want stories. Yeah, well, some people want data. Actually, what you really want is data and story. Because when you put them together, they're much more powerful than either individually. And especially if you tell a story first and then give the data. Give you a quick example. There's a well-known chain of hotels, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Probably heard of it. They're all over the world. And they're very much into customer experience and service of the highest quality because they're terribly expensive and only rich people can afford to go to these hotels, really. And their little slogan is, "We are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen." And they pride themselves on not delivering what you ask for, but anticipating what you want. So if you happen to like a certain type of flower, that will be in the room when you arrive because we found out, you know, that kind of thing. Now, how are they going to demonstrate this in a presentation? Well, they've won millions of awards. I think they're the 49th most valuable brand in the world, Ritz-Carlton. But 49th most valuable brand in the world. Is that good? I suppose it is. But 49th doesn't sound fantastic, does it? I mean, it's not the first. It's not even the fifth. It's not even in the top 10. So does that mean it's really not a great brand? I mean, you see how data in the wrong hands doesn't really have much punch. So what they decided was they would go around trying to find stories that their staff could tell. And it turned out that there was one customer who had booked a holiday for his wife, himself, and his kid to go to the Ritz-Carlton on this island off the coast of Florida, this paradise island with palm trees in the breeze and so on. This guy was obviously very rich, and he was so rich and so busy with his job that he ended up not being able to go on the holiday. So his wife went on her own with the kid. Typical. They had a great time. But when they got home, the kid discovered that he had left his cuddly toy in the hotel. His cuddly toy giraffe called Joshi. Joshi the giraffe. The kid was distraught. He wouldn't eat, he wouldn't go to bed, he wouldn't go to school. They were trying to plead with him that Joshi was probably fine and they would phone the hotel and see if they could get him back. The father even told a little white lie and said, look, he's okay. He's just staying on for a few days extra holiday. Yeah. And he's on his way home. But kids are not stupid. And the kid said, no, he isn't. You're just saying that to make me feel better. I will never see Joshi again. Boo-hoo. Burst into tears, rushed into his room. So in a frantic panic, he phones the hotel and says, look, I don't know if you've found in our room, number whatever it was, a small, horrible, washed a million times, hasn't got any spots left, lost its ears and horns, looks more like a sloth than a giraffe. It's my son's favorite toy and he is completely disconsolate. Have you found it? And they said, one moment, sir. Yes, we have. It was in the laundry. Got mixed up with some clothes that we were washing, and we have him here. He said, oh, thank God, thank God. Well, please do send him back. And they said, no problem, sir. That's already arranged. Already? Yeah, I've just nodded to someone and he's on his way. He said, well, look, could you just do me another favor? Because I said he was having an extra few days holiday. Could you take a picture of him before you send him near the pool and just send that on my computer and I can show it to my kid and he'll stop wailing, hopefully. So they did more than that. They actually took Joshi all around the hotel, taking photographs of him in different places. So sitting on a sun lounger by the pool, sitting in the health center with 2 cucumbers on his eyes, driving a golf cart around the 9-hole golf course, chatting to some other lost cuddly toys in the laundry, of which there are many. And they sent this whole file, a ring binder full of pictures with the story of Joshi's holiday, along with some toys and freebies and goodness knows what else. Now, was the kid satisfied with this? Not really, no. But in the end, he got his toy back and he was okay. But the parents were delighted that the hotel had gone to so much trouble on their behalf. And that is a story of customer service, which says a lot more than we are the 49th most well-known, recognized brand in the world. So first you tell the story, especially with some pictures of Joshi in the sunglasses with the cucumbers on his eyes. lying with a towel over him, having a neck massage. They've gone to all this trouble. You show the pictures, you tell the story, and then you give them the data. And those three things together, story, data, and visuals, those three things together are what make a potent message. So storytelling, far from being a sort of, icing on the cake, once you can already give a presentation, maybe you'd like to throw in a few stories, is crucial to being able to give a presentation. In fact, Patsy Rodenberg, who is a voice coach for the Royal Shakespeare Company, and she's worked with people like Ian McKellen and Judi Dench, even Obama, I think she worked with for a while. She says, I always think if you can tell a good story, you can learn to give a great presentation. Because all the skills you need to present are there in storytelling. You don't need to go on some terribly expensive course run by Stanford University with loads of research details on PowerPoint slides telling you how to give a presentation. You just need some simple storytelling techniques. And if you can master those, you can give a presentation. And that is why storytelling is worth teaching to business people.
Yeah, and I guess a big point of it as well is, and I've heard about this before, choosing the details which you include or which you omit. Because I noticed when you were telling that story, after the story, you could have just said this kid's cuddly toy, yeah. But because you said Joshy the giraffe, you know, then there's that picture.
Yes.
There's something. I'm immediately, I have the image in my head. So
yes,
yeah, you can omit so many things in telling that story, but the story then would have been somewhat more distant or cold or
yes.
yeah. But because you mentioned
exactly.
it doesn't really change the outcome. But you say Joshy, Joshy is a funny name, and Joshy the
Joshy's now
giraffe.
a person. He's an
Yeah,
actual little animal that this kid likes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
you're absolutely right that if you're telling a story, you don't want it to go on too long. So you don't want to crowd it full of unnecessary details. So one activity with learners that I do is, self-editing, bin the stuff that we don't need. Draft your story and then go through it going, no, I don't need to say that. Nobody actually cares where this hotel is. They know it's a Ritz-Carlton and it's in Florida. You don't have to say the exact place. Forget that. How long were they there for? Who cares? Did they have a great holiday? Yes. Why? We don't care. We just had a great holiday. And then they got home and then the toy was lost. Oh no, Joshy is missing.
Yeah,
a toy is lost. All right, stupid kid. Spoiled little brat, I bet he was. That's what people are thinking. But you go, no, Joshy's gone missing. And then you think, oh, I remember my favorite toy when I was a kid. I had a teddy bear that would. So that's it. You've hit the nail on the head. Certain things have to be in the story to make us engage. And that's one of them. The characters. The characters involved in the story have to be there. And they'll always, well, not always, but usually outshine the data. It's not always true. If we've got time, I can give you an example of the opposite. I was doing,
yeah, sure.
I have to rub my nose again. Oh, this cold. At least I'm not sneezing. Excuse me. Never sneeze while you're telling a story. It ruins the atmosphere.
The biggest tip of all, never sneeze.
Yeah, exactly. Once upon a time, chew. Oh, shit. I'll start again. I was working with some people who work for a conservation group, a sort of charity, non-governmental thing. I won't say who, but anyway. And it's quite difficult actually getting people to give to charities and to care about the issue that you care about. And in their case, it was wildlife preservation and so on. And so I said, okay, so I'll give you a little task. You go away and do this, and we'll see what happens. And I said, this is what I want you to do. I've been thinking of animals that people don't care about very much. And I've come up with sharks. Right? Most people think bloody dangerous. They are very beautiful, yes, but basically I wouldn't want to be in the water with one. I've seen Jaws. I don't want to go there. And it's true, if they survey people, most people say you must protect the oceans, but most people say we would prefer it if there weren't any sharks. So your task is to make me care about sharks enough that I will send money to help you protect them. And I thought, right, we've done all this stuff on storytelling, so perhaps they'll go off and find a story. And they did. And they found this little video clip of a guy who removes hooks from sharks' mouths. Great big 15-foot white sharks, tiger sharks, blue sharks, gets in the water with them. And they come back every year to commune with him in the water. And he plays with them like the golden retrievers. And it's an amazing video to watch. And I thought, it's a great story. But sadly, people are going to watch it and go, well, yeah, but he's just a nutcase. There's no way you'd get me in there with them. I mean, all right, so they haven't bitten his leg off. But I mean, you know, I bet they would, given half a chance. And so they said, yeah, it's right. The story doesn't work on its own. And so I said, well, what actually are the statistics for sharks attacking people and killing them? And they said, well, we don't know, because we don't deal with sharks, but you just gave us this task. And I said, well, find out. So they found out. And they said, we're amazed. And I said, well, why? And they said, well, people think sharks are so damn dangerous. I mean, and then they asked me a question. They said, do you think you're more likely to be killed by a shark or struck by lightning? And I said, marginally, I suppose, struck by lightning, especially if you won't get me in the ocean, so I'm not likely to be attacked on land. They said, well, actually, 24,000 people a year die by being struck by lightning. 24,000 people are killed by lightning a year. Amazing. How many people do you think are killed by hippos a year? 3,000. 3,000 people are killed by hippos. How many people are killed by cows? 33, I think it is. 33, not bulls, cows. Cows, for goodness sake. Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the meadow.
Yeah. Now I'm scared. There are lots of cows around here in Bavaria.
150 people a year are killed by coconuts. Just falling out of a tree on the head, bang, killed.
Never want to go outside again now.
Now, how many people are killed a year by sharks? Roughly. What do you think? Globally, in the whole world, every year, are we talking 10,000, 1,000, 100, or what?
But it's probably going to be quite low, given that you mentioned those other things.
It's 5 to 10 people a year.
That is
5 to 10 people a year are killed by sharks. And here's the kicker. How many sharks are killed by people a year?
Probably enormous amount more, caught up in nets and things.
The figure is just off the scale. You'd think, oh, well, thousands, I guess. Probably maybe tens of thousands. Maybe 100,000 even? No. 100 million.
Oh.
100 million sharks are killed a year by fishermen, for fish, shark fin soup, caught up in net, whatever it is. 100 million. Now, sharks are not endangered. There are about 1 billion of them out there. But hang on a minute, 100 million, there are only 1 billion. They're very slow reproducing. Within 10, 15, certainly 20 years, they'll be extinct. And they kill 5, we kill 100 million. Who's the real predator? And I thought, wow, here's a situation where the data is actually more powerful than the story.
Yep.
You see what I mean? So and this is data storytelling, which we haven't got time to talk about in this little podcast, but it's a very interesting area where you make the figures do the storytelling. They tell their own story. And I'd give to a charity for some poor creature that's dying by the 100 million a year, and it only actually kills 5 people a year, which is less than vicious dogs by a factor of at least 10, maybe 100.
Yeah, I'm sure you can go and look at Darwin Awards and things and find many more cases of people dying from eating light bulbs than or something stupid than
exactly.
So,
so storytelling combined with data and then combined with the visuals is a very, very potent way to make a point in a presentation. And it has applications, as we've seen, for interviews, job interviews, socializing and networking, telling stories in meetings.
And marketing as well, of course. Storytelling is
branding, storytelling,
yeah, marketing, yeah.
Exactly.
So
we live in an age of stories, with memes and RSS feeds, news feeds, YouTube, Instagram, people making their own little story videos on Facebook. Angelica's story this week, it's only out there for 3 days. If you don't watch it, it disappears.
Yeah.
We're obsessed with being the heroes of our own story. But in a business story, you're not the hero. It's important that you're sort of the mentor, you're the person who's experienced something from which the audience can learn. They're the hero of the story. That's very important.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark. This is super interesting topic because it touches on so many areas, personal areas, and like you say, something's data driven, something's anecdote driven. It's I'm sure we could talk about it for a long time, but yeah, we should wrap up the podcast. We at Melter will try to then post a link to your the webinar, the workshop that you gave as well. So I think if we have that, so we share, so people can then, who've been listening, can then watch it and go into more detail as well. And yeah, thanks a lot, Mark. Yeah, I hope to see you again in Munich some point soon. And yeah, thanks everybody for listening, tuning in. As mentioned, we are the Munich English Language Teachers Association, but actually we cover the greater Munich area all the way down to Salzburg and loads of other cool places as well. So check out our website. We have many other podcasts online, other people in ELT world as well, lots of different experiences and ideas and stories and tips. Yeah. So thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
You're very welcome. Thanks for inviting me. Bye now.